Welcome to Conversations for the Animals. I'm Lisa Tynan with Houston Pet Set, and I am joined today by Cory Stottlemyer, who is the Deputy Shelter Director of BARC. And that's a new title for you. Yes. Okay. So today I'm actually, usually I come in with a little bit of an agenda.
Okay.
Things we want to learn or questions. But really today I want to have just like a generic conversation because and I know BARC has a name and a reputation in the city of Houston, and so I just want to chat and find out what is going on there, what y'all are working on. I know a lot of our, it's elephant in the room. A lot of our partners and supporters have feelings, and we are not going to invalidate those feelings. We just, this is an opportunity for us to learn. From my end and from our partners, and how the city functions and what services BARC does and doesn't provide, and what you're working on to improve, because every organization is always working to improve. So that's my hope. Where we go with it, we'll see. But to start, first, I want to learn about you, because I know you're a communications guy.
Yes, that's my background.
That's your background. So shelter director, deputy director is kind of a new direction for you a little bit.
I still have a director of communications title on top of this other title. A lot of city,
title.
Yeah, a lot of city departments kind of operate that way.
Okay.
But ours is unique because BARC is part of a bigger department, Administration and Regulatory Affairs, that includes 311, Park Houston, the Mayor's Office of Resilience and Sustainability, our regulatory permits. So a lot of different types of sections. Payroll falls under us.
Interesting.
Yes.
Okay.
So when I joined, I've been with the city since 2018, but I joined here 2 years ago now as the public information officer.
Okay.
The previous communications director left, so I kind of slid into that role. But at the shelter, we also had some change up. So there's an opportunity with some team members moving to other sections in ARA to kind of fill this role as well.
Okay.
So most of my duties are at 90% essentially is at BARC. I'm there every day. I only handle kind of media relations and any communications related to BARC. We have another public information officer. He handles all the others, but we coordinate all the time with each other. So, came from a communications background, still kind of wear that hat at the shelter.
Yeah.
I'm here today talking about it. That's kind of been my role from the start, though, is to focus on transparency, addressing a lot of the questions that come to our team, whether it's online, whether it's being emailed to us, addressed in the media, that sort of thing.
Right.
Just to make sure we're having a consistent voice, but also making sure we are addressing all questions, because we get quite a few.
Yeah, and I think that it was news. I knew that BARC was part of a larger department.
Yes.
I mean, like, we all know that cities are gigantic. They're very convoluted bureaucracies.
Yes.
But it's interesting how random some of those things are lumped into the same thing. And I think what question that leads me to is budgetary. I mean, BARC has its own independent budget. I know the city of Houston just passed the prop. Was it C?
Part of the bond?
Yeah, the bond.
Yes.
Sorry, yes.
Yes.
So where that's a big chunk of money that goes just to BARC. But is that part of a larger budget where it's kind of shared, or are you completely siloed?
We do in ARA. We do have like a bigger budget, but we do have like our amount we receive. So BARC does have some, money earning sides of it, but essentially, we rely heavily on the budget we get from city council that they approve every year.
Right.
Because pet registration, adoptions,
right.
I mean, they're only going to go so far.
Yeah. I owe my pet registration. I need to remember to pay that this month.
A reminder for everybody. Register your pet if you live in the city of Houston.
So one thing, and I don't remember if it was you who told me this, but someone mentioned something to me that has stuck with me for like months and months and months. That and I think that it was enlightening to me just how heavily controlled every dollar and cent is in a city budget, and that's not just for BARC. That's for any city entity. That when the shelter was being built, there was a specific earmarked part of the budget that was required to be artwork. And that and to me, I love art. And I
Yes.
think a shelter should be beautiful and should be welcoming. But it's something we don't often think about, especially coming from the nonprofit world, where we have discretionary funds, and that's a big portion of our budget.
Mm-hmm.
But we also have earmarked, we have designated funds. And so we're all not all in control of the money that comes into us. And if the budget says you have to spend whatever this proportion of our budget is on artwork in the shelter, you're kind of bound to that.
Yeah. I mean, that's what all of our funds are essentially tied. So whatever fund it comes from internally, that is what that money is earmarked for.
Right.
Like in my section, we know we have this much in the printing budget. And so it is literally only for print materials.
Yeah.
So we have quite a few, which is great, but we're not dipping into other. If we run low,
Right.
we're not going to other pots. And there's some things you may be able to work with, and sometimes they require council approval
Right.
to move money around, and
Right.
that takes time and
We know
process
that well.
and addressing questions
Yeah.
from council, because rightfully so, they have a lot in mind when it comes to, hey, no, we approved this. What's your kind of planning on this regard? And they're going to want to know all the steps that led to this decision, and why is
Right.
it different from what you presented in the budget period. So it's very plainly laid out what we can earmark the certain monies for.
So you just brought up another question, which is who does everybody answer to? I guess there are levels, right? So, your staff answers to your director answers to, I think, someone in ARA, right?
Yeah, so
there's like a hierarchy
Yes,
for all of that.
we have a shelter director, and there's 3 deputies that fall under. At BARC, we have an enforcement team, and then over here with me is the outreach and customer service and registration. And then we have a 3rd section that includes our shelter and medical teams, who do like the actual in-house handling of the animals, operate our wellness center. And then we in BARC, we're part of ARA, which ARA has a director, and then that director, reports directly up to the mayor's office.
Directly to the mayor's office.
Yes.
And then when you want to make changes or do anything, I guess what has to be approved by city council and what doesn't? I mean, do you have...
It depends.
It
That's
just
all.
depends.
Yeah, it depends on a lot of monetary stuff we'll have to go through. For example, if we want to get a contract that's above a certain dollar amount,
Right.
council has to approve, or we have to go out to bid. We did that earlier this year when we had the mandatory microchipping.
Right.
We started that process last year. We had the change last year for mandatory microchipping. We were able to get some funds to go. We thankfully got our foundation gave us some monies to use for a marketing campaign, because we knew this is the first of its kind. We had that year-long education period, so we were able to procure a marketing firm. But we did have to go to bid. We have several groups we had to choose from. The one we chose was great. They have experience working in animal-related
that
with
helps
groups.
so
Yeah.
much. You
Yes.
don't realize until you've worked with someone who doesn't.
100%.
Yeah.
So they were already accustomed to language that we quickly approved. They understood kind of the semantics of things, and visually too, they understood what would work. The audience we were trying to target, they're like, we're going to go in like an animated direction and something that's like, and it worked out great.
Awesome.
But it took a while. We had that money last summer, and then we rolled out like at the end of the year into the new year. And we had to ask, like, hey, is it okay if we push back the enforcement to February 1st? And, it was an informal kind of like, yes, that's fine, because technically the ordinance had passed. It was already approved.
Right.
But the enforcement, we were going to start at the beginning of the year, and then we're like, well, the vote happened January 15th. Maybe we do it then. And we're like, no, based on when the rollout, let's start February 1st. Worked out perfectly.
Give everyone a chance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So things take time.
They do. I mean,
with the city,
in full transparency,
Yeah.
Houston Pet Set is a vendor. We had to go through that process where, city council had to approve BARC paying Houston Pet Set to do free spay and neuter for the city of Houston. And it is a very intricate process, even for federal bids. That's...
Yeah.
We're like, just here's all of our information. Please just hand us the money, and it is not that easy.
No.
It goes through a lot more steps. So you mentioned the foundation. So
yes.
I know the BARC Foundation is a separate entity, or is
Yes.
it's okay? Because you, as a city,
they operate separately from us.
you can't fundraise as a city entity.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
correct. So that's what they are designed to do. They were created under former Mayor Parker.
Okay.
501c3. Yes, they're essentially the fundraising branch. So they will host events throughout the year. They have their own board. We'll go and speak at their events, but they operate independently of us. They have their own website. They have their own like fundraising arm. So the great thing about them is when they, go out, raise their funds, it all goes directly back to BARC. So that's awesome.
And you, because that is a separate arm, the money when they give it to y'all, you have the decision-making power over how that gets used, or is it incorporated?
It has to be for like a program, or it has to be something tangible.
Okay.
So they're not just giving us, cash. It is, we have something in mind.
Okay.
But that being said, they listen to us and they come up with ideas, and they, especially with their events and their fundraising, they'll invite us out to them, but their team is, really proactive.
Yeah.
They're at events and out there in the community all the time. And so it's awesome when we have the ability to take like our adoptions trailer to those events. So we get their name recognition as well, but they're great advocates for us. And it's awesome to see them be able to do that. Because like you said, we can't do that fundraising aspect. People independently will come and ask to donate to us. And we're like, great, that's awesome. But yeah, we also have the foundation where we can funnel that through as well.
That's great. So I guess we'll get into the not dicier conversation, but you mentioned you have this amazing group of advocates that is advocating on behalf of and for the city shelter. What are they seeing? What are they getting that your detractors aren't? You understand? Like, so basically there are animal lovers and animal advocates who are out there doing the hard work to advocate for BARC. What are they seeing that the people out there who are crying foul aren't seeing? What are we missing?
I think a lot of them have actually met our staff, been to the shelter, seen the team members who care. A lot of them have been volunteers in the past, or they're engaged enough to know the work we do in like our outreach team, who works directly with rescues, who works directly with our foster network. The adoptions that happen are coordinated through our adoption coordinators and our customer service team. Our medical staff who do the consultations, the shelter team who walk them through literally the kennels and help them interact with the animals. They meet all those people. They actually see how much the staff cares. And then a lot of them are also know, like, we are a municipal shelter. We're open intake. We have managed intake, so we schedule. But sick or injured animals, we cannot turn them away, and nor do we want to. We tell the public, we will always accept sick, injured, fading animals. Welcome in our shelter. But we can't, turn away based on breed, age, weight, that sort of thing. We also have the enforcement side of things. That's what BARC was built around. Was this idea of just public safety. That is like our main originator of how we were created. We previously used to report to the health department, and then we made our way to ARA. But when that was started, the facility itself was built around that kind of mentality. The live release initiative came later. But a lot of people who are actually engaged and work with us have been there and, meet the staff and know, like, we're dedicated, to making sure we now have that live release initiative on top of the public safety side of things as well. It's
always struck me, just being in this industry, that we sometimes forget where the idea of animal welfare came from. It didn't start as sheltering. It started as an impound. I mean, that's why we called them city pounds, or just the pounds, because if your pet was out roaming the streets, you were in violation, your pet got impounded. But when those were created, however long ago that was, we didn't have the stray animal problem that we have today. So I feel like the function of municipal shelters and organizations has had to kind of evolve. But do you find, and I know you haven't been with BARC that long, but do you find that enforcement is suffering at the expense of the sheltering, or vice versa? I mean, is it feasible for an organization to have to do both all the time?
Yeah, we tell people we have a dual mission.
Yeah.
You know, and sometimes those dual missions, this public safety side and this live release focus, they can't conflict.
Yeah.
I mean, we take away managed intake and just go back to open intake. That will have a direct correlation with our live release rate.
Right.
Especially now, post 2020.
Mm-hmm.
It's a new day when
Yeah.
it comes to animal welfare, and that's not just us here in Houston.
No, not at all.
Especially states like Texas, but it's happening up north now,
Yeah.
which is really like raising the alarm bells for
Yeah.
everybody. Like, this is a very serious thing. Literally yesterday, part of my duty is I put together a media report for the executive team, kind of locally, very much focused on what's in the news happening. But we always kind of keep track of trends across all of our different divisions, but especially when I look at the animal welfare news. And Oregon and the Seattle area both were talking about how inflation was causing an increase in owner turn-ins, and then all the pandemic buys and the after effects economically that the pandemic has had has also resulted in an increase for both of those different areas up north.
Yeah.
Those are traditionally areas that have not had this sort of problem.
Not at all. It's where we've been sending animals.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We hear from our partners, like, we have a contract with Rescue Pets Movement. A lot of their animals go to Colorado. We hear those areas, they have smaller shelters too.
Yeah.
So their kennel space is limited. And so if they just barely have a dip in adoptions, it has a huge trickle effect.
Yeah.
Because if they are facing it, that's really the sign to everybody. Like, people are struggling. So that's why we try to focus on, other side of things with the responsible pet ownership, the source of the issue. But yeah, it's a long kind of winding way to say, like, enforcement, we have such a duty to the public because we prioritize those. We have like a tier of calls, like those priority one calls. We prioritize bite cases,
Right.
The ones where, there's an imminent threat to human life or human safety. And when our team prioritizes that, if we don't, respond to those priority one, priority two calls, so we can ensure that, hey guys, the animals aren't getting out, because we have seen a dip in our foster, especially huge impacts. You could see in our data over the years, the drop after 2020.
Yeah.
And we're slowly trying to work on things, but it's still trailing.
Yeah.
Our rescue numbers continue to drop. We just closed out the fiscal year, and I think there was almost 1,000 fewer animals taken out by rescue than the previous fiscal year.
Yeah.
That has an impact. And if there are more animals, the calls are increasing as well.
Right.
It was 8,000 more calls for service last fiscal year than the year before, because they did drop. I think people were at home.
Yeah.
People were not out and seeing the animals and not calling as much. And then our enforcement initially, too, while we figured out how to safely send them out into the community to protect them, we had a drop in the response. Now we're at a stage where the calls are increasing, so the enforcement is increasing, and the numbers from their side of things, that proportionally way more are coming in from the field than they are through like managed intake and through owner turn-in.
Right.
If there's nowhere for those animals to go,
Right.
for our rescue partners, and rescue is how most of our animals leave the shelter.
Yeah.
It's adoptions and foster are the second two. But if there is even a slight dip, it has impacts on things like our live release rate.
Right.
Because we have to have that kennel space available for the enforcement team.
They have to bring them in
Yeah.
and put them somewhere.
Yep, exactly. And we just saw we had a few more team members added, not this past fiscal year, but the year before, and that already had an impact. I mean, it's a drop in the bucket when you have, we get to a lot of the calls, but there's a lot that are unanswered. Like we said, those priority 4 or 5 calls where somebody just, I saw a stray animal.
Right.
Was it chasing anybody?
Nuisance
No,
type
I was
calls.
driving by. Yes.
Yeah, okay.
That if we can get to them, it's great.
Right.
But like I said, those ones where somebody's an imminent threat, and we know if somebody who lives in a neighborhood where they don't see strays, to them that's a foreign concept. But we know there are specific areas where people can't get to their cars.
We've had our mobile unit basically surrounded by aggressive stray dogs, and thankfully the enforcement team was able, because owners who were trying to pick up their pets after having just been fixed were getting accosted and charged by aggressive stray animals. So we know it exists. But like you said, if there's not a kennel for them to go into, what's interesting to me as you're talking through this and you're talking about how the rescues are kind of the lifeblood of the live release initiative at BARC, and they can't pull because they're full. They are full because they are picking animals up off the street, and they are now taking owner surrenders, which I think is a more recent development. In my experience, owner surrenders went to shelters, and then the rescues pulled from the shelters. But it seems like it's almost like they are doing their own version of enforcement as well. So they're full, and y'all are full, and all of the shelters are full in addition to the rescues. In an ideal world, how many enforcement? I mean, and let's imagine that you have unlimited space.
Yeah.
With the amount of animals and the calls that you are getting, are you adequately staffed to respond to those?
And we had recently looked internally at possibly doing that kind of change, and we looked at the number of 50 because we have around a little over 30 in our enforcement team, but that includes supervisors and managers who aren't
that's
also
not like
necessarily
field.
It's about 20 something who are actually going out, and then that's across multiple shifts,
right?
So it's not like they're all at once,
right? Not 20
out.
people out in force.
So if we could get closer, doubling it even, that would maybe make a drop in the bucket. But with that, it would have to include an increase in shelter and medical staff who are in the kennels and in the shelter taking care of them day to day. Our outreach team would have to grow as well.
Right.
The ones who are marketing and trying to promote it. Thankfully, we have 3 full-time rescue coordinators. But even now, just based on current staffing, it needs to be more. We only have 1 foster coordinator, and currently that position is open. So the rest of the team is just kind of backfilling it.
Yeah.
Our adoptions team was 2. 1 got recently moved into a supervisor role. So it leaves our current one, who the team shared marketing responsibility. Now they are our social media coordinator, webmaster. They are a graphics person. They are our event coordinator.
Oh my goodness.
On top of being an adoptions coordinator.
Right.
So it has a trickle effect because we would ideally, be able to double that amount and have actual, impacts, because until we do, we're not going to move the needle.
Right.
Those calls are continuing to grow.
Right.
And the team number is staying static.
Yeah.
So that has an impact in those communities, and we know because we hear from them. We and this is something on our side in the marketing team. We were we want to get a team to go and do a day-long coverage and just tell those stories, because I don't think they get told enough.
Right.
The side of things on the street. The heavy focus from the public is on the shelter side.
Right.
A lot of our attention, we talked about it, kind of focuses on, getting the animals out.
Right.
And we're no, we really need to show our enforcement team and see the day-to-day, those people who are in tears saying, thank you, I couldn't get my mail.
Yeah.
I couldn't go to work the other day because these animals were so aggressive. People who tell us, my dog was killed. It's a sad reality. It's hard for people. People don't want to think about it. People don't want to visualize it. But, the things that happen on the shelter, that's something that's tangible for them to think about and be point a finger at.
And they can count.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're transparent with our data. We share it. We have an urgent pets page to try to be transparent and say, hey, it's a coordinated way. Because like I said, we have 1 person running social media.
Right.
That's something I hear a lot is, why aren't you marketing XYZ in this manner? A lot of animals, not all. When it comes to certain times when we're at capacity, we have to unfortunately put length of stay animals that have no behavior issues, no medical issues, on our urgent pets list. But we frequently have animals that have behavior issues. Like I said, we're going out prioritizing those priority 1 calls.
Right.
A lot of animals that are unsocialized, have never been on a leash, interacted this much with a human. They're stressed. They're in a totally strange environment. They've never been in a captivity, let alone a loud shelter with all these noises and smells and different people interacting with them.
Right.
It's stressful.
Yeah.
They don't present their best selves. Some of them outside the shelter, we hear that often. It was but they were totally different and great. Yes, but unfortunately, that's not the scenario they're in here.
Right.
And it's no fault of their own. It's no fault of our staff either.
Right.
They're dealing with what they have to, given, what the building is, what the structure is. So we, that side of things is something that's tangible for people. They see those numbers. We promote them on this page because it's a way to funnel all of that attention. It's a way to be proactive. It updates each list that's on there. There's a code: yellow, orange, red. Those are the ones of most immediate need. And there's our length of stay. We updated it recently. It's all color coded. Our internal IT department has it set up so those pages upload some as frequently as every 15 minutes.
Wow. Okay.
So it's very transparent. But we can't always go and promote all those animals on social media.
Right.
A lot of the people who are in that audience are not experienced. They're not coming to us with, years as a foster. I've dealt with all types of animals. I know how different animal behavior I know my circumstances and my capabilities. A lot of people who are like panicking and coming at it first time. And you're like, this animal's not for you.
Yeah.
And we've seen people try and come back almost immediately.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that does nothing to help that animal was stressed before. And now they've been through, the whole loop.
Yeah.
And it's tough because we need those fosters. We need new people. Yeah, we want you to come and get involved. But again,
a first-time foster with a potential bite risk is a recipe for disaster. That I get. Yeah. I mean, and unfortunately, when you are an enforcement agency, like you said, some of those animals coming in are questionable as adoption candidates to begin with. Yeah. And Houston Pet Set, we are very vocal that we don't necessarily believe there is a home for every animal especially if they are dangerous. So it puts fosters, adopters, and it puts the organizations in kind of an awkward position where would we love a live outcome for every animal? Of course.
Yes.
Is it feasible? Is it realistic? Not really, especially right now with the animals that are coming in to rescues too. I mean, we're seeing kennels or fosters be occupied for months, sometimes years, with one animal. And that's leaving potentially good animals on the streets to become less adoptable with every passing day. Yeah. So it's I see that struggle with people want to do right by the animals so badly, and that includes BARC staff, BARC volunteers, but at the same time, what are we giving you to work with at this point?
And there's also, when it comes to like length of stay, like sure, you want to keep an animal for days and days and weeks and months, and sometimes some shelters keep them for
years,
100, 200 days. That honestly, the animals become less adoptable. It becomes almost a stigma for one thing. Why is this one in here so long? Yeah. And unfortunately, it could be a perfectly sweet, ready to go for a home, but in the shelter environment, it really should be a short time period because there's risk of disease spread. When they are stressed, they're more susceptible to get those upper respiratory infections, and that can spread. And I will say our medical team does a very good job of quarantining animals when necessary and making sure they are on the lookout so the disease spreads doesn't happen. We had a distemper outbreak, really bad one. I literally first started, we were still kind of on lockdown. Yeah. I was like, okay, so I have to relearn. And they were like, this is our wall of all the kennels that are this color and this color, and this means this, and this one green is good.
A nightmare.
Yes, and the team developed some it was strict, but it was necessary to prevent it from spreading because it's awful when a dog gets distemper.
Yep. Seen it firsthand. It is not a good way to go.
Yeah, there's a lot of issues, but really there are opportunities for the public to help. And I know, get in front of the cameras every chance I can to talk about it. It's tough, though, because we're all saying the same thing. So we're all competing for the same spaces, and we're all promoting in the same manners. But there's so many residents in Houston, and we hear that often. It's like, there's just so many households. It's awesome that there's now billboards going up.
Woohoo!
We're focusing our efforts to, we were able to get a grant last year to help us market our Healthy Pets, Healthy Streets program, free spay-neuter services to people who are impacted by the digital divide. So we're going to be doing outreach into specific communities. We're partnering with the Complete Communities. We're already a part of that group, especially with Healthy Pets, Healthy Streets already. But targeting specific neighborhoods.
So digital divide, meaning not everybody has access to a computer or smartphone. Okay.
That was something that was really brought up, obviously, during COVID response. Which community, especially people who are older, who don't have smartphones, who don't have continued access to the internet, or even, economically who cannot, afford certain types of systems, so they're connected all the way that way. But a big part of it was also targeting non-English speaking residents. We're going to be working with a group of non-English media to do both like some organic earned media, and then also like working with us to convert some materials we've made already with the grant for ad buys to try to reach even new audiences.
That's great.
So we're trying to think of creative ways now to target like the source. And, we have these responsible pet ownership kind of brochures talking about, healthy pets, healthy streets, but also our low-cost wellness center. We're focusing on the new changes when it comes to microchipping.
Right.
As part of the pet registration process that already existed, now you also are required to get your pet microchipped. So again, everybody in the city of Houston,
right,
get your pet registered, and as part of that, you have to have a microchip.
And we keep hosting free microchip events, so there is absolutely no excuse.
It's just awesome. Yeah, we've done a few. Thankfully, some of our council members are sponsored, but a lot of other groups like yours have been doing it as well.
Yeah.
And we've already seen those numbers of the return to owner increase by like 16%.
Is it really already impacting?
Yes.
That's phenomenal. I was going to ask about that. We so rarely get to see immediate impacts like that. Are you finding that these RTOs are in the field? Are we already diverting them from even having to come into the shelter?
Some of them. But a lot of them are like us getting these animals into the shelter and then doing the scanning there and finding out like it's owned, and then somebody's coming and getting it.
That's awesome.
But our free, or even we offer certain days where usually our microchip's part of a package, and we've been offering just a microchip only, and those like get taken immediately. So it's awesome to see the public responding to it. It's great that our media partners were jumping in and very heavily focusing on that.
Yeah.
It's what we need. It's not something that we can handle alone or tackle alone. I know we partner other groups who work with us closely, like we all saying the same things, and it's exciting. We're partnering closely with Harris County as well, making sure like our messages are both the same as well, consistent. We met with their foster team as we're like working to develop some new handbooks and some new platforms to help our existing fosters, and hopefully as we try to market it more and build up our foster base, we have this platform where they can more easily get resources, network with each other. There's hope, but at the same time, I foresee, the live release rate. I think as we continue to have those calls, that response to the public, I think that people need to be prepared to see it continue to stay either at where it's at or go lower,
potentially
possibly.
Go lower.
Yeah.
So, I said at the beginning, fully aware that BARC isn't everybody's favorite. We know that. It would be naive to suggest otherwise. But what can we'll just call them the detractors, but people who are, like you said, who aren't meeting your staff or whatever, what can they do? I know we say volunteer, adopt, foster, but honestly, that isn't in the cards for everybody, and we understand that. But what are ways that people, rather than sitting online and being angry, how can they affect change for BARC?
I say be an advocate for responsible pet ownership is a huge thing. With you and your network, you can make sure to spread that like constant message: spay, neuter your pets.
Yeah.
Have your pet microchipped, registered. And a lot of people who do reach out, they're not even locally based. And it does not help us when you go and you flood a social media post with comments about how upset you are. I understand. Those emotions are valid. And our staff feel a lot of those emotions as well. And so when they see those comments, it has a huge impact on morale.
Oh, yeah.
And the staff care. Most of our staff foster. Most of our staff have, myself included, adopted an animal from the shelter. And it is not helpful to anybody. And it turns away potentially new partners who come to our page. Somebody who might be interested. Oh, I heard that I can get an animal from the shelter. Spread the news of what we actually are and what we offer in terms of adoption, fostering. You can't do it yourself. Share the word. Like there are, like we talk about foster adopt, like you can become an advocate yourself. If you can't adopt, foster. If you can't foster, volunteer, donate. That is very helpful.
There is the Houston BARC Foundation, right?
Yes. I would say find a way within your community to get involved. going online and, like I said, disparaging, potentially turning away new partners doesn't help.
Yeah.
And we've seen it is a proven thing. Like, we've talked about it in conferences and with other groups. They've done actual studies, like positive coverage and positive types of content. It draws in more audiences.
Right.
Just a constant focus on the negative. Either it gets mocked,
yeah,
or it doesn't. It gets a certain type who looks for that content and may travel, because I'll see a lot. You'll go to their page and you see they're sharing from all across the country.
Yeah.
Those just like similar pages that just attack, or say like, look what they're doing, with no actual action.
Right.
And it's just lost in a void.
Yeah.
And I was like, I would really reevaluate, is what I'm saying, is what I'm sharing helping, or is it possibly hurting?
Yeah.
Am I part of the problem? And I don't want to. I don't want to say everybody's doing this intentionally. They're not.
Yeah.
They really do care. I know they do. Which is frustrating when I hear somebody, even like including my name in their stuff. And I'm just like, we're working towards the same goal.
Yeah.
And I wish there was an understanding, because we try to put it out there. There's information about what we actually are as a facility, as a municipal shelter. What are our requirements? What are we working with? A lot of the stuff we were talking about with the bureaucracy,
Right.
what we're, the confines of what we're within in terms of money making. It's been said often, BARC is the lowest per capita funded shelter in the state of Texas, big city.
Yep.
We're the fourth largest city in the country, too.
Yeah.
In a state that has huge pockets where there's massive stray problems from us, the other major cities down south on the border. This issue is not going away overnight.
Right.
Either.
Right.
And closing our doors to intake, to alleviate and keep animals is not a solution.
It's counterproductive at a certain point.
And a lot of what we're doing, we focus on like Band-Aid type solutions. Like, what BARC didn't cause this. We were tasked with approaching it first from a public safety standpoint,
Right.
and then adding in addition the live release initiative. It's growing. We need more staff. We need help from volunteers. Some of it we can only do so far.
Right.
And we have great volunteers, but they get burned out too.
Of course.
We always need more.
And that's across the board. That's not just
everybody.
the BARC.
Everybody. I think just educating yourself about, like, not just here. When we talked about earlier, it's across the country, and that has impacts. We knew we were never going to transport our way out of this, but if we're seeing a slowdown with some of our partners who are biggest, live release.
We had our main transport partner stop transport completely because they ran out of staff in Minnesota. So, like you said, we're seeing the impacts. It's not just here. We have very soon an election coming up.
Yes.
I'm obviously, you cannot speak on politics. I am not going to ask you to make any judgments or anything like that. But I mean, Mayor Turner has served his time, and he will be handing off the torch to a new mayor. What are we hoping for BARC and for the city of Houston with a new administration? I mean, more funding obviously would be great, but what else could a mayor do to kind of help this crisis?
The Mayor Turner, thankfully, he did give us $1 million in American Rescue Plan Act funding for spay neuter. That kind of focused on an additional $500,000 year before, for working with partners like yourself to ensure that we are targeting the source of the issue. As the opportunity with anything that gets focus on the city, with what our residents' needs, what's going on, the change, tension. Hopefully we get, heard in like a lot of the change, an awareness of what the needs are at the shelter. Spotlight whoever comes in during the election, after the election. Hopefully this is an opportunity for all of us at the city, but especially I'm selfish, I'm here. I want to say, we hope we are heard when we're talking about things here today. Because you hear it, like, we could go on for however long more to talk about there's a nationwide vet shortage. Like, there's other things going on that impact what's happening here in Houston, and it's a cross the nation type issue. So hopefully with an election provides us opportunity to get attention and into new households, new people who have no idea. So we hear that often too. I had no idea. Like, that's why we jump at every chance, no matter what. Like, I want to have the opportunity to spread the word.
Yeah. And we, I know we've made a couple of little teaser announcements, but Houston PetSet is hosting a mayoral candidate forum on September 18th, and we will be live streaming it on all of our most of our social media platforms. I don't even know what works anymore, but that's an opportunity for animal lovers, animal advocates, the people who are spending emotional energy paying attention to this, to, at least for City of Houston residents, obviously, to put their vote where their mouth is.
Yeah.
And so we're excited about the opportunity to hear from the upcoming candidates how much they value this platform issue, what we believe should be a platform issue, and what they plan to do about it. So hopefully people will be tuning into that. We will have more information about that coming up. But
new leadership includes new ideas.
Right, exactly.
New staff, new whatever. Change has the opportunity for good things. People's like, oh, change.
Yeah.
No, that's a great opportunity for us. Like, we welcome that. We welcome new ideas. We welcome like a refresh. So hopefully with that, coming and like highlighting too what we've already done,
right,
and focusing that, like, maybe that just needs a renewal with a certain new audiences. I think that's a really big thing I would hope to see from this.
Okay, well, that's that for our mayoral candidates listening. We know what BARC needs, and mostly it's money.
Resources are always
resources
great.
would be great.
Yeah.
But that then would hopefully trickle out to the community. The moral of the story, I think, that we have gotten at, but that I have gotten at with other previous guests, is that all of these services that our rescue partners that everybody is providing, they are all a Band-Aid until the community itself takes responsibility for the animals within our care. Tina and Tama have a little bit of a saying these days, which is, we domesticated them, we owe them this much, is to be responsible for their care. So, spay and neuter, obviously. It's probably the number one thing that we can all do. And it's just sparked a question, and I don't know if conversations have happened with enforcement around BARC, but a lot of people have been coming up to posting on our billboard campaign, post all of these things saying mandatory spay neuter. Has that ever been a conversation within the city? I have my own conflicting feelings about it that I don't need to get into, but I don't. Is that something that is discussed? Is that something that's realistic for the city?
Realistic, based on our current staffing level, I don't know.
Okay.
Because a lot of when it comes to our enforcement, it's based on us responding to those calls. Those calls come into 311, we go out, or council receives feedback, they go out and respond. In terms of proactive enforcement, I don't know what that would look like.
Yeah.
Including based on our existing staffing levels. Now, we could hope, like with microchipping, it's honestly similar.
Yeah.
A lot of people jumped on that, but you have to provide them those opportunities.
Right.
Mandatory spay neuter, we mentioned the nationwide. It's not just a Houston or Texas thing. It is a nationwide vet shortage.
Right.
We're all competing, all these agencies, for the same amount of surgery spots across the board. We at BARC, we've had vacancies for a while in our vet area. And when we in-house are struggling to keep up with the numbers, and thankfully we have contracts with external partners who are able to do it, but our own animals we send out that are up for adoption don't all get done in-house.
That should be something in-house, but it can't right now.
Yeah.
So,
That's the thing. Like, ideally, it sounds great, and when you lay it out on paper, sure, we would want to get there. But in terms of like how feasible it is enforcement-wise and actually getting successfully done, that would have to be seen. It's something that's always brought up just in like the kind of hypothetical, like not like necessarily tangible yet, but it's been brought up, sure, and it's been discussed. We've looked at all options. Yeah, we truly have, and just seen what we can do with existing resources and staff,
working within the confines of what we got now. That makes sense. I had a conversation with someone, and I'm trying to remember which municipality it was. It was one of the more outer counties where their mandatory spay neuter looks like if your animal has been picked up multiple times by enforcement in order to get your pet back. I think after the third time, you don't get them back unless you get them fixed, if they're not already fixed.
That's all ours. That if your animal is picked up, it's not going home unless it is altered.
That I didn't know.
Yes.
That's fantastic.
Yes.
Okay, so that's that. I learned something today. So that's like a sideways approach to mandatory spay neuter.
The only way it wouldn't happen is if it's too young,
okay,
or medically it's not healthy enough to go under the surgery. But nope. We do not release it back to the owner until it's been spayed or neutered.
And that's done with in-house with y'all, so
Yes.
it's not an extra charge to that owner, or are they paying a fee or a fine?
Sometimes they usually do, because we may charge them the boarding costs.
Right, the RTO fee.
Yes.
Okay.
And that being said, though, sometimes we hear stories like, I'm sorry, I have a husky who we all know are masters
They leave.
Yes.
They just go.
And it's not because they're unhappy.
Yeah.
They could be like the most spoiled, well cared for. One of mine snuck out when we first moved into our new house.
Mm-hmm.
He's a rescue, and he, unfortunately, still to this day, we've had him for 13 years almost.
Whoa.
Yeah, he's very skittish, very scared. He's a sweet baby around us, but strangers scare him. Fireworks.
Oh, forget it.
Yeah. I think this was a thunderstorm that he got scared, and he found a way. He's this lanky dog, but he got under the side gate at our new house. And thankfully, somebody was out front like right away and just was like, "Oh, hey, Rugby," and put him right back inside.
On back in.
But that happens.
Yeah.
So when we hear that and somebody says, "I can't afford it,"
Yeah.
these fees, we will work with the public.
That's good.
Our goal is to keep pets at home.
Right. We don't want them in the shelter.
No,
That's not the goal.
exactly. We want them to go back with their owner.
Yeah.
And we don't want the alternative either, or like send them up with a rescue. Nope, sorry, you out of luck.
Right.
Shipping them off to Colorado, blah, 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 blah,
Right.
blah. No, we want to reunite them with their owners. We'll work with them.
Okay, that's good to know. That was a total random tangent, but it popped into my brain. So with a new administration and new ideas, we can hopefully tackle these issues, obviously working within the confines of what we already have, which we know we have staffing issues, not just in the veterinary side, but across the board.
Across the board, yeah.
With a new era comes new increased demands for wages. People want to be rightfully paid for the work that they are doing, and we know, if you ask anybody working in animal welfare, everybody's criminally underpaid for the emotional burden of the work that we do.
It is tough work. Yeah.
It's heartbreaking. And I think, what I take from this is a reminder to recognize people's humanity. Mm-hmm. I've been in this industry long enough to know that we're never going to agree with what everybody is doing all the time.
Yeah.
That's just the fact of the matter. It is such a high stakes industry because it is literally life and death. Mm-hmm. But it is a nice reminder for myself and for everybody to show a little grace, have a little humanity, and recognize the humanity in other people who you and I both know. Nobody gets into this work for the money, for the glory. It's all because we love animals.
Yeah.
Whether or not we all agree with decisions that are being made is kind of besides the point, because ultimately we're all working towards the same goal.
Yeah.
Which, kumbaya moment, but really it's Houston
Yeah.
Pets that we believe in collaboration and working with each other, because if we're battling, the only creatures that suffer are the animals that we're trying to save.
100%. It's impossible to tackle this without partnering.
Yeah.
Like, nobody can do this alone at all.
Yeah.
Because it's such a complex issue from all sides.
Yeah.
There's no way one agency. Like we said, we rely heavily. Our fosters, our rescue partners who get out the animals, they're the ones who are able to help us. That live release rate before we started this initiative was the opposite of what it is today.
Wow.
Maybe less than 20%.
It flipped?
Yes.
Wow.
And so I want people to have that context too. We've been able to make huge strides. And I think some of the changes we made over getting to 95%, some of that was outliers because of the changes happening with people at home taking in animals.
Right.
And, slower intake.
Right.
And now we're at a point where, it's totally different.
It's kind of like a regression towards the mean here at this point. Yeah.
Exactly. So until the dust fully settles from that, it's going to be a minute. And within the bandwidth of what we have, I think this is foreseeable future is this continued trend. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's something to keep an eye on for sure. And for our partners, you know, we can shout all we want, but until people are actually in the trenches doing something about it, you know, let's try and focus on action rather than words at this point. That's my request. That's my personal request, because I'm tired of people bullying other people.
Yeah. Get involved. Get involved.
Exactly. Get involved. And you know, I don't live in the type of house where I can really foster, and I know other people are in that same situation. But like you said, there are other ways. There are ways to affect change in a positive way, because we're all about good vibes.
Exactly.
You know, we want happy, positive kumbaya without you know, acknowledging. We have to acknowledge that there is a crisis.
Yes.
But we're working on it.
Yes. Channel that energy into something positive. That's the key.
Done. That's a perfect place to end it. Cory, thank you so much for being
Thank
willing
you.
to kind of elaborate on some things that I don't think we always get an opportunity to hear about. It's educational for all of us, myself included. So thank you.
Thank you.
This has been Conversations for the Animals. I am Lisa Tynan, and we will see you next time.